This is a true story from my life, and I wish I could say it was neat and cinematic the way a movie wraps up in 2 hours. I was 22 when it happened, standing in borrowed heels at a rooftop launch party in Boston's Seaport, trying to look like a grown-up founder who had it all under control. The lipstick smear on Evan's hoodie wasn't mine. Under the purple heat lamps at Lookout Rooftop, while our team clinked champagne and investors made small talk about unit economics, my iPhone buzzed face down on the cocktail table. A location pin for the Liberty Hotel, room 802, sent by Mia HR to my boyfriend, who'd just slipped downstairs to take a call. The receipt tucked beside the bar was for a ride share to Charles Street, charged to the company card that our CFO, Cole, had sworn was locked down for mission-critical spend. We were gathered to toast Harbor Loop's launch, my app, my first baby, and the humiliation bloomed in my throat like a swallowed ember. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. You should know where I was coming from. I grew up in Ohio. Not fancy, the kind of childhood where a big treat was splitting a 6-pack of Krispy Kreme on a Saturday and sneaking extra frosting off the box when Mom wasn't looking. At Northeastern University, I loved the co-op rhythm and the way Boston felt like a machine that you could learn if you listened to it long enough. Green line rattles, rain on brick, kettles in dorm kitchens. I met Evan's sophomore year in a software engineering lab where everyone wore hoodies and AirPods like armor. He was charming in the easy way of people who'd always been told they're promising. We built Harbor Loop as a capstone that turned into something real. An app that stitched together campus rideshare, event RSVPs, and student discounts, then scaled to other schools. I did product and partnerships. He did growth and vibes, which was not a formal title, though he wrote it on his Slack profile anyway. By the time we were 22, we had an office in a WeWork on Atlantic Avenue with big windows and plants I watered every Thursday, and we'd landed a seed round from a trio of angels. 2 of them were fine. The third was Cole Harrington, mid-30s, designer stubble, a voice that could turn kind or cold in 1 degree. He'd been a frat star at Dartmouth, and then a growth lead at a unicorn bank app. He called me kiddo twice in the first week, until I said not to. He laughed and said I was feisty. He also brought Mia in as a part-time HR and operations assistant to take some weight off your plate so you can be the visionary. It felt like a ribbon tied too tight. I had told myself for months that the knot in my stomach about Evan was stress. Founders don't sleep, founder couples even less. But I noticed his phone habits, how he turned his screen face down when we were at Tata on Summer Street, how he took his Apple Watch off and left it in the bathroom drawer, how he insisted we switch to Google Chat for speed instead of iMessage, where our history lived like a timeline of nights and plans and love. I noticed the hoodie, that charcoal one with Northeastern E-Club, cracked across the chest, smudged at the collarbone with a perfect lipstick crescent after he'd helped Mia box up swag. At the launch party, the line of investors looked like a row of chess pieces under the heat lamps, all polished and intentional. Cole put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed, like he could feel my pulse. "This is a big night for you, kiddo," he said, quiet enough the words slipped by again as a tease instead of a slap. "Don't lose the plot." I lifted my phone. The Liberty Hotel pin sat like a little red eye on the map, blinking. A second ping. "Room 802 is ready, key at the front desk under C." The attached photo was a folded paper envelope with the Liberty's gold logo and Harrington scrawled on it. I didn't go to the hotel. I wanted to. I wanted to throw open the door and end the movie that way. Slam, gasp, evidence. Instead, I took a breath. I ordered sparkling water, smiled at the photographer who wanted to shoot the founders with the skyline behind us, and I put my phone in my purse. I knew the humiliation would harden into something useful if I let it sit. Suspicion is strongest in the quiet after. The next morning, the sun bled into my apartment through blinds that clacked when the heater kicked on, and I brewed Keurig coffee and watched the cup steam. Evan's hoodie lay on the back of my bar stool, the lipstick stain like a signature. He'd stayed at his apartment because he'd crashed early, which was a lie he forgot would have fingerprints. People who lie always forget their fingerprints. I didn't have to break into anything. Evan had left an old iPad in my place, one I used as a second screen when I worked late. It was still signed into his Apple ID, and he'd just added Google Chat to it, a new habit with old plumbing. The chat synced. He'd made a folder titled HL Ops, where he and Mia dumped expensible receipts and discussed calendar alignment, which turned out to include Room 802 and Do Not Disturb sign is on. I took photos of everything with my phone. The spend tag to Team Wellness, the ride shares to Charles Street, the champagne charged to the Harbor Loop card, the blurry mirror selfie with his hoodie in the corner, and Mia's signature lipstick, a muted cherry red, on his neck. I also saw messages with Cole, not flirty but worse in their way. Cole called him my quarterback and the voice we need, and wrote about me like a problem to be handled. She's not a killer, Cole wrote. She's detail, not CEO. She breaks in front of pressure. I need someone people follow. Evan sent a thumbs up and a wolf emoji. I can hold the room, he wrote. She can keep ops clean. There are moments in your life you can point to and say, that was when I grew an inch you can't measure, sitting on my IKEA couch with sunlight on my knees and my coffee cooling on a coaster from a weekend in Portland. I grew. It wasn't a blaze. It was a click inside me, like a door finally fitting its frame. I did not cry. I would later at stupider things. The T ride stopping in the tunnel too long, a dog tied outside a CVS in the rain. But then I opened the notes app and wrote, evidence log. Evidence is boring and beautiful. It's timestamps. It's headings. It's not rage tweeting. It's sections. I pulled our WeWork access logs through the admin portal and matched them to security camera timestamps the building manager had sent me when we had a package go missing. I asked for a call with our bank rep at SVB, still swaggering, still solicitous, about unusual spend. I exported the company card statements and highlighted Charles Street and Liberty Hotel Bar and the Beacon Hill Bistro. I cross-referenced the Slack logs where Evan posted motivational quotes with the time blocks where he stepped out and matched them with pings from his and Mia's calendars. I printed the receipts on a cheap Brother printer that always smudged the left edge, and I slid them into a blue folder labeled Finance Policy. People like Cole are powerful, not because they're geniuses, but because they move before you realize the floor is shifting. The week after the launch, he called aboard check-in at our WeWork. The room smelled like cold brew and printer ink. The glass walls reflected me in a way that made me look smaller than I felt. Cole sat at the head and smiled at me like he could see the future where I was gone. He opened with compliments. The launch was strong, he said. Big downloads, good buzz. He turned to Evan, and the growth narrative was tight. You present like a natural. Then to me, but we do need to talk about leadership optics. We have an enterprise pilot with an events platform that wants to know who's steering the ship. They want to see a killer. I'm steering the ship, I said. Sure, Cole said, as if I'd confirmed a minor detail. But founders evolve. Sometimes the best visionaries aren't the best CEOs. No shame in that. It's about getting the right people on the bus. He slid a printed deck across the table. The first slide had my name demoted to Chief Product Officer and Evans promoted to Interim CEO. We'll make this clean, he said. Optics matter. You'll have more time to focus on what you're great at We'll set you up with a coach." My hands didn't shake. I put them palms down on the table and felt the faint grain of the veneer. "We're not doing this," I said, and my voice was calm enough that Evan glanced at me like he'd expected me to plead. Cole's smile thinned. "I'm your largest investor," he said. "You don't get to not do this. We're doing it next week." "Are we?" I asked. "Because, per our shareholder agreement, a change in CEO requires a board vote, and we have 3 seats. Yours, mine, and the independent seat we still haven't filled because you wanted to wait until after launch to bring on Linda." I let the name sit. "You said we'd confirm her this week." Cole's eyes flicked for half a second in a giveaway he probably hated himself for later. Linda Cho, former COO of a Boston fintech, had asked sharp, fair questions on a diligence call and then passed on investing because she didn't want to be passive. She agreed to be an independent director because she liked the product and because she'd had her fill of guys like Cole. "We'll schedule Linda after the transition," Cole said, voice smooth again. "It'll be cleaner." "Or," I said, sliding my blue folder out of my tote and putting it on the table so the smudged finance policy label faced him, "we schedule a full board meeting with council present and discuss 2 separate agenda items: appointment of Linda and review of policy violations. See, if we're talking about optics, we should talk about misuse of company funds, wellness spend at the Liberty Hotel, for instance, and undisclosed relationships in reporting lines." Evan's chair squeaked. "What is this?" he muttered, the first time his voice had sounded small around Cole. Cole didn't look at the folder. He looked at me. "You're emotional," he said, soft in that patronizing way. "Let's not blow up something good over a breakup." I leaned back. "A breakup?" I asked. "Is that your official characterization of line manager having a relationship with his direct report, booked under team wellness, at a hotel you personally reserved?" I held his gaze. "Because that sounds like an HR issue, and since Mia reports to me in the org chart you made to keep me in my lane, we can also talk about how you circumvented that process. That's a governance issue." "I'm not your employee," Cole said, and there it was, the heat under the smooth voice. "No," I said, "you're a fiduciary, which is why Linda will be very interested when she reads our materials. The board packet I'm sending this afternoon includes an agenda, my memo, and supporting exhibits." I tapped the folder. "There's also a letter from outside counsel at Goodwin, who's kindly agreed to brief us on conflicts of interest and clawback provisions if we terminate for cause." Cole could have roared. He didn't. He sat back and let silence do the work, the way powerful men do when they want to remind you the room is theirs. "Schedule the meeting," he said finally. "We'll vote." That night, my apartment felt like a war room and a sanctuary. The radiator hissed. My roommate, Jules, who took LSAT practice tests for fun and could verbally diagram an argument like a crime scene, brought home takeout from Sweetgreen and set her laptop open next to mine. "Let's tighten your memo," she said. "Your case is solid. Don't spike the football, just show the ref the tape." We did. We wrote it like a story because truth is always easier to follow that way. First section, Harbor Loop's mission, our growth milestones, the launch metrics, downloads, DAUs, partnerships in the pipeline with the Boston University student government and the Red Sox College Knights. Second section, governance overview and open board seat, the email thread agreeing on Linda. Third, policy violations. Finance, itemized hotel charges, bar tabs marked team wellness, ride shares between the office and the Liberty. HR, relationship between Evan and Mia without disclosure, direct report dynamic, and equity, potential purchase of Evan's options by a Harrington Growth LLC entity for a discount triggered by a key person transition flagged by Goodwin as a textbook conflict. Fourth, remedies we proposed, independent board appointment outside HR investigation, suspension of Evan and Mia pending review, and a resolution to appoint me interim CEO during the investigation because I was the only founder with no conflict and the only one who could sign contracts without triggering an investor approval threshold. It was lawful, cold, and devastating on paper. It did not mention lipstick. It did not need to. We sent the packet. Linda replied in 20 minutes. Thank you for the thorough prep. I am available tomorrow at 4 p.m. ET. Goodwin will dial in. Please include the building access log exhibit and the company card CSV in the deck. It was the kind of email that makes your shoulders drop. The hours before the meeting felt like standing backstage and hearing a crowd through the curtain. Evan texted, "Can we talk?" And then, "Please don't do this." And then, "You're overreacting," in a one-sided skirmish that turned into, "This is why you can't lead," to emotional when I didn't reply fast enough. He sent a photo of us from a year ago at a Red Sox game, his arm around me, my smile easy and unafraid. He wrote, "We were good." I put the phone face down on the counter next to a Chipotle bag we hadn't opened and watched a line of ants find the smallest sugary drop of soda and carry it away, unstoppable. At 3:58 p.m. the next day, the WeWork conference room smelled like sanitizer and new carpet. Linda's Zoom tile lit up, blunt bob, dark blazer, glasses with thin gold rims. Goodwin's lawyer, a woman named Sarah, with a voice like a metronome, dialed in. Cole joined from a gleaming home office and did not turn on his camera at first, a small power play that made me feel stronger because it was so petty. Evan showed up, in person, eyes red-rimmed like he'd either cried or wanted me to think he had. Mia did not appear. She had emailed a medical leave note that morning, which I had forwarded to HR Harbor Loop, the address I made for the outside firm we retained the hour the packet went out. We started. Linda took the chair and made the agenda clear. Sarah from Goodwin walked through the fiduciary duties of board members and the definition of cause as it applied to terminations and clawbacks. Cole finally turned on his camera, and I watched the flicker of his jaw when Sarah read the conflict of interest section that sounded, in neutral legal cadence, like a biography of his behavior. Then it was me. I told the story like the memo. I did not stumble. I anchored every beat on something concrete. Building access logs showed Evan and Mia leaving within minutes of each other, after hours, on 5 separate nights, with ride shares to the same location, Charles Street. The hotel receipts were charged to the corporate card and tagged as wellness, a category we reserved for Team Peloton subsidies and a monthly yoga class we'd negotiated with a studio near South Station. The Google chat logs were work product. Our policy said no expectation of privacy on company devices and accounts. The Slack messages between Cole and Evan about optics and transition were attached, as were Evan's draft CEO announcement posts saved in Notion, with timestamps a week before the board even discussed a transition. It painted them not as lovers, which would have been messy and human, but as conspirators, which was actionable. Cole spoke last. He called me inexperienced. He said startups required hard calls and that I was locking us into a risk-averse culture. He said the relationship was consensual and not interfering with performance. He said the hotel spend was client development. He said a lot of things you say when you're used to sounding right, even when you're wrong. Linda looked into the camera like she was looking into his eyes. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. Motion 1. Appoint me formally as the independent board member, effective immediately. Carried by vote 2-1. Cole dissented for form. Motion 2. Retain Goodwin and an external HR firm to conduct a formal investigation into the alleged policy violations. Carried 2-1. Linda's voice stayed crisp. Motion 3. Suspend Evan and Mia with pay pending the outcome of the investigation and restrict access to all Harbor Loop systems beyond email. Carried. Motion 4. appoint my full name as interim CEO to ensure continuity. She didn't have to say carried. Cole closed his eyes for half a second and said, I object for the record, the way men do when the record is the only soft place left to fall. After the meeting, the air in the office changed. It wasn't dramatic. It was like the tension that had lived in the corners got told to pack up. I collected Evan's badge and laptop at the front desk with HR on speaker and wrote acknowledged receipt on the form. He didn't come in. He emailed from his personal account, first furious, then apologetic, then threatening. My attorney will eat you alive, was his exact phrase, which made me think of wolves again and how often boys like to see themselves as animals when the truth is they're just irresponsible men. I didn't fire anyone that week. I watched the process work because I made it work. The external HR firm, a woman-led shop out of Cambridge, moved fast. They took statements, reviewed logs, triangulated receipts. Goodwin looked at the equity documents and found the attempt to transfer Evans' options to Harrington Growth LLC at a 60% discount in the event of my transition, a clause Cole had slipped into a side letter that required my signature, but which he had tried to route while I was at a campus event. He'd forged a received stamp in a way that would have been funny if it weren't criminal. The day the reports landed was a rainy Tuesday in March. The blinds made zebra stripes on my desk. Linda called me first. It's bulletproof, she said. HR substantiated the relationship, the undisclosed reporting dynamic, and the misuse of funds. Goodwin recommends terminations for cause for both Evan and Cole's role as an officer. She paused. He's not an employee, but he is an executive officer under our filings for practical purposes. We'll remove him. As for his board seat, the shareholders will vote. I've already lined up the 2 other angels. They're with us. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'd thought I'd feel fireworks. Instead, I felt the clean relief of dishes stacked in a drying rack. When do we do it? I asked. Today, she said. We did it by the book because revenge that lasts needs paper, not spectacle. I signed the termination letters on letterhead we redesigned that morning, cleaner, less boyish, and I scheduled 2 separate meetings. Evan came first. He arrived in a gray hoodie with the E-Club logo and the lipstick stain, faded now, like a bruise that had learned patience. He sat across from me at the long conference table. HR was in the corner, silent. I slid the letter toward him like an offering. I loved you, he said, not opening it. I loved us, I said. That's different. You're not a killer, he said, and smiled like he'd found a weapon I didn't know I had. I'm not, I said. I'm a builder. Today I'm building a place where I don't have to wonder if the people who say they have my back are using it as a landing strip. He picked up the letter. He read it. He didn't meet my eyes when he signed the acknowledgement. He asked what his severance was. For cause, I said. There isn't any. He laughed once, a dry bark. Cole will destroy you, he said as he stood up. He knows everyone. He knew everyone yesterday, I said. We're still here. Cole's meeting was in a different room, the one with the big ficus and the glass wall that looked onto the shared space where founders in Patagonia vests talked about burn. He dialed in from a black sedan, which I knew because the seatbelt was visible across his chest. He smiled at me like we were playing chess and he was 3 moves ahead. Linda was on the call, and Goodwin's Sarah. I read the resolution removing him as an officer and the notice of a special shareholder meeting to vote on his removal from the board. I read it in the same voice I'd used to order a coffee. Calm. Clear. I didn't let my eyes search his face for a flinch. You want a battle, he said. War is longer. I'm more patient than you think, I said, and I don't drink at the Liberty while I charge it to the company. He laughed like he wanted the world to hear how little he cared. Good luck, kiddo, he said, and hung up, cutting the call into a hard, flat line. Leadership is quieter than the movies make it. After the administrative dust settled, there were still metrics and contracts and the small miracles of user feedback that told me we were making something people wanted. I sat with the product team in the common area with Post-its on the wall. We sketched a new onboarding flow on a whiteboard that squeaked. We pushed an update at 11:53 p.m. and watched the error logs dance and then settle. I went to bed and woke up at 5:58 to a Slack from our back-end engineer that said DAUs are up 18% day over day. I made eggs. I watered the plants. I wrote a press release with Linda that said, in human words, that Harbor Loop was moving into a new chapter with me as CEO and with a commitment to transparent, safe culture. People cheered me in public the way strangers cheer survivors of fires they didn't see, and I accepted it the way you accept flowers after a funeral. Not for show, but because beauty is allowed to sit next to pain. The text that mattered came from women I'd met through Northeastern's entrepreneurship program, and from a student at BU who wrote, I heard what happened. Thank you for not making us feel like we have to be quiet to be strong. When the shareholder vote came, it wasn't close. Cole sent a letter full of words like value destruction and witch hunt and overreach. 2 angels wrote back with their own letters, 1 sentence long, we vote to remove. Cole threatened to sue. Goodwin wrote him a letter so polite it felt sharpened. He faded. I did fire every one of them, but fire wasn't pyrotechnics. It was cause letters and clawbacks and badges turned in at a desk that had seen too many hands. It was removing their access to our Slack channels and watching the list of names shrink until the people left were the ones who had eyes I could meet. It was Mia's termination after the HR firm concluded she had knowingly skirted policy and expensed personal spend. I included a paragraph about the way we failed her with a broken power dynamic because ethics means not pretending things are simple when they aren't. It was telling a team at a Friday all hands, we're going to be okay, and believing it because I had data to back it up and because the room felt light. Evan emailed me in April from a new address with a signature that had the logo of a different startup, one with a name that sounded like a smoothie flavor. He wrote, we could have been special. I typed, we were. It's just that I'm special without you, too. I didn't send it. I archived the email. The Liberty Hotel receipts, all 8 of them, lived in a manila folder in a drawer in my apartment for a month. On a Saturday, I walked them to the shred bin in the mailroom and slid them in. I kept the blue folder labeled Finance Policy because you never know when you'll need to tell a story again. There was one last thing. A month after the vote, after the press had gotten bored and moved on to a new scandal at a bigger company, I took a cardboard box with a lid and put Evan's hoodie inside. The lipstick stain had faded, but I could still see it if I tilted the fabric to the light. I added the engraved bracelet he'd given me on my 21st birthday, the one that read, to my CEO, like a joke you tell yourself and swallow whole. I added a printed photo of us at Fenway, smiling into the sun, my hair pulled into a high ponytail, his hand on my shoulder, as if the future he imagined was something he could hold. I added a note that said in handwriting he would recognize, I became the thing you said I wasn't. I walked to the North End post office and mailed the box to the forwarding address he'd left with HR for final documents. When I slid the package across the counter, the clerk stamped it with a hollow thump, and the noise felt like a door closing on a loop. In June, we signed a partnership with a national ride share for campus safety escorts, and the Boston Globe ran a piece about the young CEO steering Harbor Loop into the mainstream. The reporter asked if I had a chip on my shoulder. I said, no, I have a product roadmap. She laughed and then grew serious and asked what I'd tell another 22-year-old founder whose board called her soft. I said, Sham, soft is not the opposite of strong. The opposite of strong is sloppy. Keep receipts. Keep your ethics. Keep going. Sometimes, late at night, the memory that returns isn't the night at the rooftop or the Liberty Pin or the board vote. It's the look on the back-end engineer's face at that Friday all hands when I said we'd be okay. Relief can look like devotion. It can look like people deciding together to stay. On my first official day as CEO, the office was quiet at 7:15 a.m. The ficus was still alive. The light was blue as the sky made up its mind. I unlocked the glass door with the new code the office manager had set and placed my bag on the table. I pulled out a new nameplate Jules had ordered off Etsy because she's that kind of friend. My name, Chief Executive Officer, it was a small, silly object. I set it on the desk and smiled. In the drawer, organized now, a gold paperclip pinned a single sheet to the inside wall so it couldn't wander. It wasn't a receipt or a chat log or a signature. It was the board resolution with my name on it, signed in ink that looked almost black in the morning light. The office door clicked shut behind me with a quiet seal. I opened my laptop. The screen bloomed. Outside, people walked to work with coffee in paper cups, unaware. I thought about the Liberty's carpet and the cheap envelope with the gold crest. I thought about how humiliation can become architecture if you mix it with enough patience and proof. I took a breath. I started the day. The end.